Hey, it's so great to be with you here this morning at Streamline Church. We know Pastor Dave is suffering in Europe, going to Spain, and then picking up a couple days in Rome afterwards. So, if he comes back speaking Italian or Spanish, you'll know that he's a very good language learner. It is great to be with you here this morning, and just little introduction. Yeah, we are excited about what God is doing. And my ministry, I say mine, but there's actually 19 of us. God is doing all kinds of amazing things. We run mentoring programs for students in schools here in Sacramento, in Lake County, Portland, Bay Area. God is doing great things in those places this year. Last year we had about 300 at-risk refugee and homeless youth in our mentoring programs in the public school. This year that went to over 1,000 students. Absolutely amazing what God is up to in that situation. We get to speak across the country on critical issues that schools have needs. Teen suicide has nearly tripled in the last decade. Obviously seeing incredible things that are happening in schools. And one of the issues that we've been able to speak on is human trafficking and exploitation in schools. Have an opportunity to travel with the FBI, the CIA, Homeland Security, and spoken to hundreds of thousands of students about those kinds of things. We take students to and people and churches to different areas, not only in Baja California, where we have built a home for single moms and their kids, but also we are about to embark on our next project there as well, which will be a summer camp, a base of operations, international church, and a second place for families who will take in orphans. God is up to huge, huge, huge things. And we're so excited about that. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me this morning as your guest. Everyone has been so gracious. And if you have your Bibles, turn to Numbers chapter 22. If not, don't worry. I will read it to you. I've been reading for some time, and I'm quite proficient at reading. But I want to share with you one of the strangest stories in all of the Bible. Before we get to that, I would love it if you don't mind standing up with me one more time. If any of you grew up in Catholic church, I went one time. It's a bunch of stand-up, sit down, so you'll feel right at home. If not, well, then you're getting your anaerobic and aerobic exercise in one day. Would you pray with me if you'd be so bold? Say, Dear God, I'm so glad I'm here. And God, today, you can say whatever you want to me. I'm listening. I mean that. Really. In Jesus' name? Amen. All right, as you're sitting down, look at the person next to you, say, if you just lied to God, you're in big trouble. I have two beautiful children. I say beautiful because they look like their mother. Sometime I had a friend not too long ago. She said she had never met my son. She said, "What does your son look like?" I said, "Imagine me if I was cute." She said, "I cannot imagine that." That's hurtful right there. But they're 13 and 14 years old, and I would like to think that I am a good dad, but I am also a questionable parent. You're saying, how can you be both good and questionable? Well, I think that I do a pretty good job, but there must be some question about my parenting abilities, because my wife, every year she goes away for a trip with friends from college, and last year when she went away, she left a 3-page schedule. Now, keep in mind, I've been a father for 14 years, and she was leaving for 48 hours, 2 nights, but she felt the need to print out a schedule to tell me exactly what to do with these 2 teenagers. I wasn't offended. I found that helpful. My mother-in-law, who lives with us, she came down into my office, and she had a duplicate printed schedule, and now I begin to think, okay, clearly, we're unsure if I can keep these children alive for even 48 hours. But I wasn't offended. My mother-in-law is very helpful. Then we had a friend come over who had lived with us for a couple of years, and she had the same schedule printed out, and now I knew, okay, no one trusts me to keep these children alive. I thought, this is a little bit crazy. People look at me when they see me interacting with my children. My daughter, her name is Dakota, she'll say, she's at that age where she thinks things aren't fair all the time, and she'll say, how come Declan, that's my son, how come Declan gets to do that and I don't? And I'll say, that's because Mommy and Daddy love Declan more. And she'll say, That's not true. I'll go, it is true. He was already here when you got here. And although we have chipped off some of his love and given it to you, it would be unfair to make it 50-50 because he was here first. And she said, Dad, that's not true. When parents have more children, God expands their hearts so that they have more love to give. I said, that's a lie other parents tell that I will not be a part of. She looked at me, rolling her eyes. I said, honey, do you ever maybe think like it would be nice to have a normal dad? And she looked at me. This is how smart she is. Without even blinking, she looked back at me. She said, nope, extraordinary dad means extraordinary life. I thought, okay, here we go. And I tell her all the time, I say, listen, here's the thing you got to understand. God is perfect, okay? His love is boundless, and it is unconditional. Daddy is not God. You must earn every single day. Every day, earn. Because there's a favorite spot. And when you wake up in the morning, that spot is available to you if you will just earn. Now listen, Daddy is not God. God is perfect, okay? And not only is he perfect in him, but in the way he deals with us, he is perfect. It says these words, and this is amazing, in 2 Peter 1:3, it says, God has given us everything we need to live a godly life. The life, your best life, your most effective, your most productive life, God has laid out for you. He has already given you everything that you need to live that life. Now, if you aren't so churchy as to think, okay, amen, that sounds good, you might be asking yourself the question, if that's true, then why are we missing some things in our lives? Why is it that we say, it doesn't feel like I have everything that I need to live the life that God has put out for me? And I want to say this to you this morning. The crux of the human journey is this, that God has given us everything that we need. He's put it right there, but we have an inability to grab it. We have an inability to take it. We have an inability to live it. And we have an inability to even see it. And it's like God has laid out everything for us, and we're sitting there still saying, God, I need this. And he's saying, it's right here. It's because human beings suffer from something that I would like to call awareness deficiency disorder. It is the inability to perceive what God is up to. God speaks perfectly, but we hear poorly. God shows us things in vivid detail, but we see, like Paul says, like a poor reflection in a mirror. It is not because we're evil, although sometimes we definitely are, but it is because we are human beings and we suffer with spiritual eyesight and spiritual hearing. All of the things that we struggle with are because we're human beings. And really the crux of God's word in the Bible is trying to tell us, listen, there is something out there if you will grab for it, if you will look for it, if you will see it, and everything around you will change. Now, Numbers chapter 22 is probably one of the best, most just blunt examples of what I'm talking about today. And if you're not familiar with this story, it's the story of Balaam. It is one of the strangest stories in all of the Bible. I know the Bible is filled with really strange stories, but this is perhaps even the strangest. And here's the story. Children of Israel, after 400 years of slavery, they leave Egypt, but they blow it along the way, and they travel through the desert for 40 years. As the unbelieving ancestors die off, God says there's a new generation who believes, and they park on the other side of the Jordan River from the promised land, ready to take it over. Now, that is awesome if you've been wandering the desert for 40 years looking for a home, and God has promised it to you. That is great for you. It's not so good for the people that already live there. And the people that live there are involved in human and child sacrifice and all kinds of evil things. And God's intention is to drive them out. And those people that are there, they're looking at these people and they're saying, these people, this ragtag group of people that don't have even a real army, they win every battle when they shouldn't even win. And they think to themselves, they must have divine help. And of course, they're right. But they don't know what to do, so they survey the land, and they find this guy named Balaam. And Balaam has a reputation for being able to know what is going on in battles and tell you ahead of time whether or not you can lose. Now, we don't know how Balaam knows this, but Balaam does actually hear from God. So they send emissaries to Balaam. They say, hey, listen, will you come and curse these people? One of the kings says, they're like oxen who devour everything in their sight. That's old-timey talk for we are in big trouble if we don't get some help. And so they go to Balaam, and Balaam says, hey, I would like to help you, but there's only one problem. I don't actually decide the outcome of battles. I can only tell you what's going to happen, what God tells me. And they say, okay, well, will you go talk to God? And he goes to God, and he says, hey, what about this? Should I go curse these people? And God says, do not curse them. I've blessed these people. You don't know them, but I know them. And I have blessed them. Don't curse them. So he goes back, and he says, hey, I can't help you with this. And they say, you don't understand. We will back up a truckload of money to you. And he says, no, you don't understand. I don't affect the outcome. I can only tell you what's going to happen. They say, why don't you ask one more time? And Balaam says, all right, you stay the night. I'll go talk to God. And when he does, this is a really bad move. God pulls the thing that your mom used to pull when you were a kid. He says, fine, go ahead, go. But he does not mean it. And he puts an angel on the road to kill Balaam. And in verse 21 of Numbers chapter 22, it says, so the next morning, Balaam got up, saddled his donkey, and started off with the Moabite officials. But God was angry with that Balaam was going. So he sent an angel of the Lord to stand in the road to block his way as Balaam and his two servants were riding along. Balaam's donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. The donkey bolted off the road into a field, and Balaam beat it and turned it back into the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood at a place where the road narrowed between two vineyard walls. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it tried to squeeze by and crush Balaam's foot against the wall. So Balaam beat his donkey again. Then the angel of the Lord moved further down the road and stood in a place too narrow for the donkey to get by at all. This time, when the donkey saw the angel, it lay down under Balaam. In a fit of rage, Balaam beat the animal again with his staff. And here's where it gets weird. Then the Lord gave the donkey the ability to speak. What have I done that deserves you beating me these 3 times? It asked Balaam. You've made me look like a fool, Balaam shouted. If I had a sword with me, I would kill you. But I'm the same donkey you've ridden your whole life, the donkey answered. Have I ever done anything like this before? No, Balaam admitted. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the roadway with a drawn sword in his hand. And Balaam bowed down his head and fell face down on the ground before him. Why did you beat your donkey these 3 times? The angel of the Lord demanded. Look, I have come to block your way because you are stubbornly resisting me. 3 times the donkey saw me and shied away. Otherwise, I would have certainly killed you by now. I would have spared your donkey. Then Balaam confessed to the angel of the Lord, I've sinned. I didn't realize that you were standing in the road to block my way. I'll return home if you're against me going. But the angel of the Lord told Balaam, go with these men, but say only what I tell you to say. And this time Balaam gets the message. He goes, and 3 times he walks out and he blesses God's people. The king ends up saying, hey, listen, Balaam, you didn't have to come. And you didn't have to curse these people. But was it really necessary to bless them? This is just salt in the wound here, guy. We're already going to be killed. And Balaam is this weird character. It's a strange story for several reasons. I already told you, but Balaam is kind of a psychic. He's sort of a sorcerer. We don't know how he hears from God. And he gets it right here eventually, but later he'll get it wrong again. He'll try to teach the enemies of God how to defeat them in battle and deceive them. He'll eventually be killed. Jesus talks about him in the book of Revelation, so we know it's a real story. It's not just some allegory. And it's really weird. Here's another strange thing about this story. Balaam's donkey can talk. Now listen, I know we read the Bible and we just kind of gloss over all these things that happen. Oh, look here, the water parted and 2 million people walked through on dry land. You know, we read all these things like it's normal. But Balaam's donkey is talking to him. That is not normal, okay? This isn't Narnia. It's not Harry Potter, okay? This is real life, and a donkey is talking. And what's even weirder about this story is this. When Balaam hears his donkey talking to him, he isn't even surprised. He's just mad. I don't know about you. I mean, when the donkey talks to him, he goes, hey, listen, why are you beating me these 3 times? Do I deserve this? And Balaam says, yes! If I had a sword with me, I'd kill you! I don't know what you'd say if your donkey started talking to you, but I think I'd say, you can talk? I mean, first I thought I would be a little surprised, right? But then next, I don't know, I'd probably be a little hurt. I'd be like, oh, all these years, we're out riding along, just you and me, and it's the silent treatment. Wonderful. We could have been talking about last night's bachelorette, but no. But Balaam isn't even surprised by this. But here is the weirdest thing about this story, is that the donkey is driving along. He sees an angel in the road with a sword, ready to kill Balaam. It's there. But for some reason, Balaam cannot see it. The Bible says that God gave the donkey the ability to speak supernaturally. But the donkey is not seeing supernaturally. He's seeing what's in the road. It's Balaam who has to be given the ability to see in this story. Think about that for a second. What is clearly in front of both of them, a dumb beast can see, but Balaam, the man, the sage, the psychic, he can't see what is clearly in front of him all along. And you and I, we suffer from this same thing. That what is clearly in front of us, what God is clearly speaking to us, what he's showing us, what he's doing, we miss it constantly. And, we can look at that spiritually, but this happens to us all the time in regular life. I don't want to put too many gender stereotypes out there, but I would just say this. As a man, it seems like my fellow men and I are less perceiving than the average woman, okay? Again, I'm not trying to go in broad stereotypes, but I would just say, generally speaking, we tend to be a little more clueless as to what's going on. I was thinking about one of the most clueless things I ever did. My son and friends from college, their daughter, were born on the same day. And then we both had second daughters around the same time. I was at the second birthday party for our friends. It was my son and their daughter had the same one. And I was holding their newborn infant. And as I was standing there talking to the mom on a hot summer day, I was looking at her, and I don't know what I was thinking. My mind was just wandering. I was just talking blah, 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 blah. And her body, how many of you know that when a woman has a baby, she doesn't just go right back to Olympian shape in her body, okay? The ravages of carrying a human being in you affects your shape for a longer time than that. And so as I was standing there talking to her, I just looked at her holding the baby, and I said, boy, it's hot. I'll bet you're going to be glad when you get that baby out of there. She looked at me, she said, what? The one you're holding? And all of a sudden, it was like, danger, Will Robinson. What have I done? All of a sudden, I realized, what in the world? How could anyone? And I thought, okay, better go on the offensive. And I looked at her, I said, what are you talking about? And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I have no idea. And I handed her the baby and walked away, and we've never spoken about it since then. And you think to yourself, wait a second, Jeff, is that a true story? Why would I tell it if it wasn't? Yes, I did something that dumb. I was just not paying attention at all. And this happens all the time. My wife sends me to the refrigerator, and she says, get the cheese. And when I go there, I can't find it. I call her, and I go, you find it. She finds it immediately, because when I go to the refrigerator, this is what I see. And when she comes to the refrigerator, this is what she sees. Yes, because I have something that is a common malady to most men called refrigerator blindness. It is the inability to see anything that isn't on the front row of the refrigerator. And wives, you think we're stupid, but we all do it, so it must be a common syndrome that men get somehow. Don't worry, your children have it too. And we get it wrong constantly. And it's funny when those things, or a little bit awkward when those things happen, but God puts opportunities in front of us all the time. A few years ago, I was flying back from speaking, and because of a weird weather situation, my flight from Denver to California got canceled. And they sent me to Albuquerque, New Mexico on a connection instead so I could get to California the long way. It was going to be long ways. And when I got on the plane, there wasn't that many people on the plane, maybe 15 or 20 people on the whole plane. And I was sitting with a seat between me, there was a lady that was probably in her early 60s, and she was dressed very nicely. And I wasn't really talking to her because I like to mind my own business on the plane. And the flight attendant came back, and she said something kind of rude to me, which was weird because Southwest are usually very friendly. And I kind of went, and I looked over at the lady, and she went, that was weird. Somebody's having a bad day, you know. And so we started talking. She said, I said, man, I don't even know why I'm going to Albuquerque. Like, who goes to New Mexico for any reason? And she said, yeah. And I said, why are you going to New Mexico? And she started telling me, she said, well, my daughter, she went to Texas Tech, and she got her degree in engineering. She said, but she met this guy, and he's involved in something. She goes, I don't know. It almost sounds like a cult. It's called InterVarsity. If you don't know what that is, it's a college ministry where they have, like, church services on campus. It's very multi-denominational, very much not weird. And she said, yeah, she got so into it with this guy that she met. She got sucked into it. She said he graduated with a degree in economics and she with her engineering degree. But instead of going and getting good jobs, they moved to New Mexico to start an InterVarsity chapter at another college. And she said, I don't know what those weirdos are doing. And I kind of said, well, it's not that weird. I know about InterVarsity. And I kind of explained to her, I'm a minister. And she said, man, maybe you can explain to me what this whole thing is about. And I said, oh, well, so you're going to visit their new ministry? She said, no, they lived there a couple of years. She said, about 9 months ago, so my daughter became pregnant with my first grandchild. She said, when they did the amnio, they found out that they were going to have a child with severe Down syndrome. And they seemed completely okay with it. I thought they were in denial. They just said, well, if God wants us to have a kid with Down syndrome, that's the son that we'll love. She said, but it was worse than they thought. She said, he only lived for a couple of days. She said, and I went there for the birth, and I hung out for about a month. She said, I've been in Denver back for the last week, taking care of some things at our law firm, but I'm going back to help them. We're going to repaint the what was going to be the nursery and so on and so forth. And I was like, oh, I mean, what do you say in that situation, right? And I sat there, and I just started to mind my own business again. I felt God speak to me and said, ask her a question. And I just said, hey, ma'am, I said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but you talked a lot about your daughter and her son and their grief, and you're worried about how they're going through it. This is going to be your first grandchild. How are you doing? And she instantly began to sob uncontrollably. So much so that people on the plane that were just scattered around the back of the plane were looking back, and I was like, I don't know, it's weird. And I mean, she was trying to talk, and she couldn't. She was trying to say, I'm sorry. She couldn't do that. And a couple minutes went by where I waited for her to say something, and finally I just said, do you mind if I pray for you? And she nodded. She still couldn't talk. And I put my hand on her. I started to pray for her. And the atmosphere in the plane changed. So much so that people were going a little bit like this. Maybe you've been in those situations. They were looking back towards me. I prayed with her. We started talking afterwards about the God that can heal grief. And we talked about this whole situation. When we went to get off the plane, we held two hands and looked at each other. And she said, I got to talk to my my son-in-law and my daughter about what they have that I don't. And she walked away. And as I waited for my next plane to connect, I thought about all the times that I missed that whisper from God along the way. God speaks to us. Can I tell you something? God is always up to something. He's always up to something. One of my favorite movies growing up was The Karate Kid. If you haven't seen The Karate Kid, you should leave church immediately and go watch The Karate Kid, okay? I'm not sure how you can understand anything in our society if you haven't seen it, but in case you haven't seen it, it's about a kid who moves from New Jersey to Southern California and gets beat up by the cool kids at school, meets a short handyman Japanese guy from Okinawa, and he says, I'll teach you karate. But when he starts his first day of karate, he says, we got to make this sacred pact. Everything I do, you say, you never question it. He says, okay, no problem. He says, all right, first, you're going to learn karate by doing what I say. He says, all these cars, he has a bunch of old cars, so you're going to wash them and wax them. And you're going to do it in a certain way. You're going to wax on and wax off. And then the next day he shows up and he says, you're going to sand my deck, and you're going to do it a certain way. And he says, okay. He shows up the third day, and he says, all right, you're going to paint my fence, and you're going to do it a certain way. He shows up the fourth day. Mr. Miyagi isn't even there. He says, I went fishing, you paint the house, do it a certain way. And when he shows up back from fishing, Daniel is mad. And this scene plays out right here.
I learned how to sand your decks, maybe. I wash your car, paint your house, paint your fence. I learned plenty, right?
Not everything is as simple. Daniel-san! Daniel-san!
What?
Come here. Show me sand floor. Sand floor. Sand floor. Big sucker. Sand floor. Sand floor. Yes. Now show me wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off. Hey, wax on, hot. Wax off, hot. Concentrate. Look at my eye. Lock a hand. Thumb inside. Wax on, hot. Wax off, hot. Show me paint the fence. Up, down. Up, down. Up, down. Other side. Look eye. Always look eye. Show me paint the house. Side. Lock wrist. Side. Yes. Show me wax on, wax off. That! Show me paint the fence. Show me side to side. Show me sand or floor. Yes. Come back tomorrow.
Here's this kid who I think the actor is probably about 25 at that point. But here's this kid who thinks he's just doing chores when all the time his trainer is creating muscle memory in his life. And here's the thing that I want to tell you. Just because you can't tell what God is up to doesn't mean that he's not up to something. We look back in the past and we say, I couldn't tell what God was up to, but I can see now what he was up to all along. But right now, since I don't know what God is up to, he's not up to anything. And if we can have any kind of foresight, we can say, no, every time I think this, God is up to something. He just waits to show me till it's the right time for me. But instead, we sit there and we say, well, if I can't tell what God is up to, he must not be up to anything. Paul says it this way in 2 Corinthians 4:18. So we fix our eyes, not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Paul says, listen, if you just get your vision focused on what's in front of you, you will miss what's real. We have this idea, you and I, that this is the real world right here, but there's also this spiritual world. There's also this temporary, this eternal world out there. When in reality, the whole message of the Bible is that there is this eternal, real world, and what we see here is just a poor facsimile. It's just a poor reflection. It's just echoes of eternity. And the real thing is out there. And if you and I focus too much on this, we will miss what God is really up to, the real thing. And keep in mind, Paul, when he says, listen, don't see this, see that, because that's the real thing. He is a guy who will later go on to say, I had it all together. I had the education, the family, I had the right religion, I had everything. And then I met a man on the road, Jesus Christ, who knocked me off my horse and struck me blind for 3 days. And for the first time in my life, I could really see. Through blindness, Paul could see the truth for the first time, and he's not the only one. Elisha has an army that his servant can't see. He keeps saying, there's more with us than with them. There's more with us than with them. Ezekiel gets showed a valley of dry bones, that flesh goes back on them. They become an army. Jesus is constantly saying to his disciples and his followers, look, I'm trying to show you. I'm trying to tell you what's going on. At some point, he just gives up and he just says these words. In John 16, 12, and 13, he says, there's so much more I want to tell you, but you can't get it right now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he'll guide you into all truth. Jesus says, what I'm telling you right now doesn't make sense. But in the future, you'll look back to the past and you'll see everything that I was saying. And it will all make sense to you for the first time in your life. Because that's what God does. And for you and I, there's people in this room, God has given you a vision. God has given you a dream. He has showed you a purpose that you are to fill out in your life. And you're saying, I don't know what's happening. What happened to all that? It must have just been the stupid idea of somebody who was too emotional. And God is saying, I have a plan for your life. Maybe your life has been derailed by divorce, by death, by disease. I've got to tell you something. God is up to something, and the fact that you don't know what it is does not mean that God isn't up to something. But we have to latch on to truth. Listen, 4 things from this scripture. Number 1, don't limit God. Don't limit God. God uses a donkey. And listen, there might be times other people can't see what you see. A year ago, we were buying land in Mexico. We found out the federal government was going to take over that land. And I realized, okay, God is up to something else. In 30 days, we found a better piece of land, 8.5 acres, in 30 days that we'll start building on. We're going to put a church at a summer camp, a base. God is going to do great things. But as I stood there, I realized God is up to something else, even though I don't know what it is. I should have been freaking out, but I wasn't. And then a lady came to us and said, you were talking about what you want to do in the future to keep families together. Orphanages around the world are not filled with kids, mostly, whose parents are dead. They're filled with kids whose parents can't take care of them. And I had a vision. Let's keep families together. Let's start by building homes that single moms can live in for free, that we can teach them job skills, we can help them take care of their kids, we can do parenting skills, how to deal with money. We'll even help them save up money so that they can buy a piece of land, and then we'll build a house that they can own on their own. I thought down the road, we'll do that. But now down the road became right away. Somebody said, you want to do that? How about you do it now? And we stood at the bottom of a hill, and I looked up, and I had a friend of mine with me from a church in San Diego. And I was talking to him. I said, why don't you help us on this project? He said, what project? I said, can you see it? 9 homes, a community center, bathrooms, a playground. We'll put it all right there. He said, what I see is cactus and weeds. I said, oh, yeah, but God's going to do something great. It's going to be a place of hope. We're going to call it Hope Village. And not only, it's on a hill, so everyone around it will see what's going on. He said, okay. I said, let me show you something else. I took him up to a place, a ministry where a lady from Canada who was in her 70s said, I'll take in ladies who've been trafficked, enslaved, abused, thrown out, homeless. And we went up there, and she had 4 trailers, a shack that somebody had given her. And they had 27 kids and 9 moms living in those places with just what's left of a catering tent. Was their only place to play and eat and do anything else there. And I said, let's talk to this lady. I said, do you have any ladies that are about to graduate out of this program? We could start taking them from stage 1 with you to stage 2 with us, and stage 3 is we'll work together for them to own a home of their own. And I got excited about it. My friend said, hey, why don't you come talk to our missions committee? Actually, he said, we'll meet about it. I said, how about I show up? He said, yeah, I'm going to ask them to give you $10,000 or $15,000. I said, how about I show up and I try to make that 15 instead of 10? I've been fundraising for a while. He said, okay. I showed up. He called me as I left the meeting. He said, we've decided not to give you $10,000 or even $15,000. We decided to give you $40,000. I said, whoa. Bulldozers hit. Things got difficult fast. Political problems. Can't get water. Electricity's difficult. People struggling in all kinds of ways. And he said, I want to go down and see that. And in December, I took him down and his team. But I was so discouraged by that point that I didn't even go out for 3 days to the place that we had built. He said, I want to see it. So I took him out there, and I went on ahead. I wanted to make sure nothing was in bad shape or anything. And when I got there, here were the homes that we had built. People had worked on them after we left. They had paint and sheetrock, and there were bathrooms. And I just thought, this is so crazy. And the kids, 11 kids, 4 moms there right now, came up and grabbed me around the waist and around the legs. And they asked me in Spanish, are more Americans coming? Because they had had hundreds of Americans there building those homes. And they thought, Americans are people that bring hope with them. And as all this was happening, I was looking up on the hill as his car was there. And he had stopped. I thought, I wonder what's going on. And when he got there, he had tears in his eyes. And I've known this guy since college, and he's not a big crier. He's pretty cynical. And he said, I couldn't see it when we stood at the bottom of the hill. He said, I wasn't ready for what was going to happen when I pulled over the hill. He said, you said it. It's exactly like you said. The first 4 homes of 9 are there. He said, I didn't think you could do it. I said, you gave us $40,000. What are you talking about? He said, well, I don't know. You were pretty convincing, even though I couldn't see it. Listen, God will not give everybody the same vision that he gives you. And sometimes they won't even believe you, but they might still help you just because they see the passion in your heart. Don't limit God. Secondly, don't just do what you've seen other people do. We started a school assembly program a couple of years ago, really 5 years ago now, where we would bring in 3D video, 42-foot video wall, have multiple speakers and a survivor of human trafficking to talk to students about how to keep their friends from getting sucked into something as insidious as sexual slavery. Since that time, we've traveled with FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, 400,000 or 500,000 students later that we talked to. We were in Mississippi last year, and I was traveling with guys from the Homeland Security, and they had guns on them, and they were telling me horrendous stories I could never repeat. And I looked there, and I thought, what do these people need with a couple of preachers and somebody who survived human trafficking? They have millions of dollars. They have guns. They have everything they need, but they didn't have everything they need. They didn't have the idea that we had and the ability to connect with students to keep them from getting sucked into that for the first time. If you only do what you've seen other people do successfully, you'll probably see the same things happen that you've always seen happen before. Number 3, expect a beating. Donkey saves Balaam's life, tells the truth, and nearly gets beat to death for it. In case you think this is an Old Testament story, Jesus said, listen, all men will hate you because of me. Isn't that a great promise? Thanks, Jesus. That's a great promise. He said, they're going to drag you in front of the synagogues. They're going to put you on trial for your life, and many of you will die. Can you imagine? Like, is there any way to take my name off the sign-up sheet? Jesus promised us it will be difficult. And yet, when we hit the slightest opposition, we go, I must have missed God. There's nothing right about this situation. How come everyone doesn't love me and see me as a hero? The last thing is this, and if Pastor Steve and the team wants to come, don't disqualify yourself. God uses a donkey. He uses a sorcerer. God can do whatever he wants with whoever he wants. And when God points at you, don't go, must be looking the other way. I tell stories all the time. And people go, where do you get all these crazy stories? I go, I have poor judgment. If God says, I'm opening this door, I think, well, you should probably just walk through it. And then there's other people following me. And sometimes I think, what are we doing here in this situation? And I'd like to think that maybe God asked somebody who is a little more qualified and a little brighter than I am, but they said no. And he thought, you know what, every time this happens, I know this one dude named Jeff who's just crazy enough to just do it. And I've seen God do amazing, incredible things. Not because I'm somebody special. I don't even have the abilities that Balaam had. I'm more like the donkey. But God can do whatever he wants. And I'll end with this story. My wife always hated dogs. She didn't grow up with dogs. She thought dogs were smelly and loud and shed. A couple of years ago, we needed to protect our house while we were traveling, so we rented a dog from some friends. Yeah, they had a boxer, which looked mean, but they're really nice dogs. And she called me one day. She said, I went to check on our house. She said, I had the weirdest feeling. She said, I showed up, and the dog was there, and it was so happy to see me. It was protecting our house. She goes, I had this weird feeling. I thought, I like this dog. And she said, maybe we should get a dog. And I thought, okay, I like dogs. That sounds good. My wife, you got to understand, she thought people that really love dogs are like, emotionally deficient in some way. And I thought, okay. And all of a sudden, we got this dog. We went to go meet this dog, this rescue, and we ended up bringing it home with us, this 85-pound boxer. And she's like instantly one of those weirdo people that's like posting pictures on the internet of her dog and telling stories about her dog. I was like, you've really switched over here, kiddo. Wants the dog inside all the time. Dog's never slept a night outside. And I told her, I said, you know what would be fun? I said, when I was a kid, we used to raise animals and breed them and sell them, and it was really fun. There's nothing cuter in the world than a bucket of puppies. And I thought, that would be fun for our kids, too. One time. We're not dog breeder people. We don't have time for this. But one time, let's do it. So we got another boxer, and they made puppies, and my wife said, okay, the one thing is you've got to help me with this. And I said, we have raised children together for 14 years. She said, that's what I'm worried about. Sure enough, I was gone when the puppies were born. And she was calling me and going, oh, man, there's another one just came. What's going on? I said, everything's okay. God takes care of this process for the most part. I got home a couple days later, and I remembered something that somehow I had completely forgotten. Puppies are born completely blind, almost utterly helpless. My son was so worried. He came in. He tried to pry their eyes open. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. God shut them, God will open them in due time. 2-3 days, even a week before their eyes open. They don't just stay alive with almost no help. They thrive. They gain weight every single day. And I remember staring at these puppies thinking, I remember this, but this is so weird. They only have 2 instincts. One is stay close to mom. Mom made us. Mom is the source of life and nourishment. We have to stay close to mom. And number 2, stay close to your brothers and sisters. Completely blind. They stay alive, they survive, and they thrive with those 2 instincts. If you've been to church probably one time before, I don't need to apply that to your life. But I will say this. All of the searching and trying and crunching up your face and just praying a little harder is not always the way to find what God has already given you. He's given you everything you need. Sometimes it's sitting down and closing your eyes and saying, God, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to open my ears. And I'm just going to let you do what you do.